What happens when the late-night King TV doesn't like the people who come on? Johnny Carson knew Carson for his charisma, humor, and smooth delivery. But behind the scenes, there were some famous people he just couldn't take it. From interviews that were hard to dodo difficult times that never got better set, Carson had some limits and some stars went too far with them. You might think you know who rubbed him the wrong way, but wait until you see who ends up that way. But wait until you see who gets to first place. Let's have a look at the list of visitors Johnny Carson wishes would never have he sat down on his couch. Lola Falana. Let's get going. Start things off with the Queen of Las Vegas herself, Lola Falana. In the past, this woman was everywhere, singing, dancing, and lighting up the stage all throughout the US. She was a force to be reckoned with, performer who won her crown by a lot of talent and charm. When she came on The Tonight Show, she was there to discuss about her amazing time in Vegas residence. It sounds like a great plan, is that right? Not really. The talk went on for a moment. Falana started, things took an unexpected turn, talking about race issues openly and the unfair treatment she had seen in the business of entertainment. Now, Carson wasn't exactly known for plunging into a lot of social commentary, and this caught him totally off guard. But hold on, there is more drama. Falana's big job was taking place at the Aladdin Hotel. Yes, that Aladdin. The identical one that turned into a big problem between Carson and Wayne Newton. Falana got it without even trying, trapped in the middle of Carson's fight with Newton. Talk about being in the wrong spot, wrong time. After the show, Falana's invitations to the show tonight mysteriously dried up. She continued crushing it in Vegas for years, but Johnny's that door was closed on the couch. At times telling the truth has a cost, even when you're simply being honest about your life. Dana Carvey. Saturday Night Live put Dana Carvey on the map as a comedian fame, and at first everything seemed ideal between him and Carson. He received highly sought-after places on The Tonight Show, and Johnny really seemed to enjoy the skills of the young comic. But then Carvey made a big mistake. He changed his ability to make impressions right on the ruler of the night himself. First comic Arsenio, a harsh SNL sketch, Carvey made fun of Johnny by playing him as an old-timer who is desperate to imitate the younger, cooler style of Arsenio Hall. The sketch effectively made Carson seem like outmoded and trying to stay important. Ouch! But this is where everything gets crazy. Carvey really had the guts to accomplish a variant of this impression right to Carson's face on the show tonight. Picture making fun of your host while you sit in his studio on his show. Right in front of him, the trust, or maybe the whole thing. It was shocking that they didn't read the room. Carson thought it was not funny at all. The invitations stopped arriving. When Wayne's Carvey's World became a huge hit, may have used the show to Carson made sure that didn't happen by promoting it. Happened. For the last year of his Johnny kept Carvey at bay during his epic run at arm's length, showing that you don't make fun of King is in charge of his own fortress. Ed McMahon. You could have thought, hold on, Ed McMahon, his own partner? The man who thought it was funny for 30 years. This one is surprising, but the fact is more complicated than what people saw on screen. Johnny and Ed were on camera, together. They made magic. Ed's large personality and a booming laugh that was just right. Johnny's caustic sense of humor and timing. They seemed like closest buddies, having a great time every night of their life. But on Suhan the cameras were off, things were very not the same. The issue was easy. They were totally different. Ed was the heart of the party, of the event. Loud, social, and always ready to spend time with anyone and everyone. Johnny, on the other hand, was very private, almost like a hermit. He didn't do the party scene in Hollywood, and definitely didn't want to get drinks after work. Several persons who work at the broadcast confirmed that Johnny and Ed didn't spend much time together outside off studio. It was only for business. Even more unexpected, Johnny said that to his own son that he couldn't stand Ed McMahon. That's a really harsh thing to say. To say about a co-worker every day for 3 decades, every day. The strangest portion, they made it work. Their on-screen chemistry came so naturally that no one people who watched from home could tell there wasn't any stress behind the scenes. It just shows that the greatest professional wrestling don't always need not personal friendship, simply respect for each other and knowing what makes anything good TV. Rich Little made a living by becoming a persona kind for copying. He could sound like Ian. Movie stars, presidents, and Johnny Carson. For a period, Johnny seems fine with it. Little was Carson would smile when his regular guest came and giggle when Little broke into his impression they made on each other during their talks, but behind the scenes, Johnny was keeping track of the score. Every moment Little Carson at a nightclub or awards show, I was more disturbed than he let on. Look, Carson was very protective of his brand and his image. Having someone else out there playing Johnny Carson at different, it seemed like Little was borrowing from events, his identity without his permission. The breaking point came in 1982 when Little's appearances on The Tonight Show quickly came to a standstill. Rich said in his claiming that Carson had him kicked out for performing too many impressions of him. The people who made the show had a different story. They reported that Little's act just got old and boring. He remarked it was classic, they said, situation. Here's the best part, Little finally got back at him in the finest method possible. When HBO made The Late Shift is a movie about the crazy fight about who would take Carson's place, who do you think played Johnny? Little Rick himself. Think about not being able to show me own show and then getting paid to do it play that person in a big movie. That's some really deep irony right there. Wayne Newton and Johnny Carson was real at first, friends. Newton was on The Tonight 30 times, leveraging that platform to make himself famous and make a name for himself, a legend in Las Vegas. Everything was fine until money and property became involved. Both men wished to in 1980 acquire the Las Vegas Aladdin Hotel. Wenton's bid beat Carson's. Something changed. Johnny didn't take care of closing very well, and he started to use his platform to attack Newton. The humor in his monologues went from humorous to pointed, aimed at Newton's look and way of performing. But Carson went too far when he began to make jokes that hinted at Newton had ties to organized crime. That's not just making fun of someone, cutting hair, or being on stage. Thought a charge that might really hurt rapped Infinity. Newton wasn't laughing. The issue became worse to the point where Wayne Newton really did come up a teen person at Carson's office to give a warning. Stop with the jokes or there would be consequences. Carson backed down in the meanest jokes, but the friendship was over. Newton never got a second invitation to the performance. What began as a work connection and real friendship came to an end over agreement that went bad. At times money certainly does ruin everything. Read Oliver. If you want to see Johnny Carson was properly checked out and uncomfortable, watch his interview with Oliver Reed, an actor from Britain. This one was a train crash from beginning to end. And you could see Johnny's mind working, figuring out how many more minutes until he could get away. Things went wrong when Shelley Winters, another visitor, decided to throw her whiskey over Reed's head during the talk. Instead, it didn't help lighten the mood. It just made it worse, made everything more uncomfortable. Reed kept making jokes and trying to break. Carson didn't want to deal with the stress, though. During the whole portion, Johnny looked like he was really bored. Most of the time, he would talk to them and chuckle at their tell stories and go along with their energy. Nothing with Reed. Nothing, just dead eyes and counting the minutes. When Reed would Carson make a point about something, would disagree and give his own point of view, not in a fun way, but in a people in the audience don't care what you think. In a way. At that moment, you could see Johnny trying to fight back Asmal, but not in a nice way. It was the smile of someone who was going through something they really hated. The whole thing with the interview had this strange, angry energy that wasn't it much like Carson's normal smooth style of hosting. No one actually knows what specifically concerned Johnny about Reed. Maybe the drinking too much, or maybe the crazy British actor energy, maybe just a clash of personalities. No matter what it was, this is still one of the most uncomfortable and toward the most interesting Tonight Show interviews ever. Carson makes zero effort to disguise his lack of interest. Charlie Callis. Hey, Carly Ellis was a well-known comedian for his strange facial expressions and crazy characteristic, and most of all his amazing sound effects. He could make sounds that appeared inconceivable for a human mouth could not make. He adored Carson for it, making around 50 reservations for Callis more than 20 years. That is serious, being loyal. Then came the appearance in 1982, put a stop to everything. Callis went out and did his usual things, but this Timite just didn't work. The jokes didn't work, not good. The audience wasn't responding, and you could feel it bombing right away. Carson was now an expert at saving things, fading humor. He might turn a failed be making a joke even funny by admitting the failure. This time Johnny answered Callus's problems every day by making a whistle sound like a dropping a bomb. It was his way of saying this isn't working through humor. Fair, that's enough. When performers know when substance dies. But Callus did make a huge error. He pushed Carson. He meant it as a joke, like if they were friends making fun of each other. But headedly misunderstood the relationship. They seemed nice on TV, but they couldn't be pals who could touch each other with one another. Carson said right away and harsh, "You will never be on this show again." Right there on livid in front of millions of P.O. Pleculus worried and sought to play for viewers. I urged Johnny to let it go as a joke. Think again. The people in the audience sat quiet. That made me feel bad. Carson didn't move. He meant every word he said. Carson hosted for another 10 years, and Charlie there was no more talk about Callus. Hish's career went on because of Hish lost his friendship with Mel Brooks, but had spotlight on The Tonight Show for life. One push, and decades of goodwill went away. In a matter of seconds. Joan Rivers. This one hurts because Joan Rivers and Johnny Carson had a real friendship. Carson didn't just make Rivers a guest. He made her a regular guest host who let her sit in his chair when he didn't work at night. Rivers said that Carson started her career, providing her the exposure she needed to become a star, needed to get famous. For a long time, everything was great. Next, 1986, what happened? Fox gave Rivers her own late-night conversation show that goes head-to-head with Carson. This was a big deal for Joan, her own show, her own stage, a chance to get out of Johnny's shadow. But she made one huge career defining. She didn't tell Carson about it. First, Johnny was upset when the news got out, heard about it through the grapevine instead of from Rivers herself. He thought Betch'd caught off guard by someone he believed in and helped. Carson didn't just ban Rivers from his show. He did made it plain to everyone in the entertainment that anyone who was on her show would never be welcome in Fuel'd never be welcome on the show Tonight Show. Think just how strong that was. Carson could basically block guests from being on they didn't want to see Rivers' show because they didn't want to lose access to his much wider stage. It made it very hard for Joan to book people, and her program had a hard time because of it. She was no longer the host a year later. Eventually, the show became Arsenio Hall's job. Rivers tried to say sorry, trying to reach out and fix their friendship, but Carson never answered. He didn't say anything else for the rest of his life. They still did when he died in 2005. Hadn't talked. Joan said publicly sad with how things turned out, wanting she should have handled it differently. It's one of the saddest fights on TV history because it didn't have to happen. One talk, one warning call before the deal was done, and maybe they would still be pals. Pride instead and damaged feelings ruined a meaningful relations. Bob Hope. Bob Hope was a famous comedian who made people laugh troops, ruled movies, and was basically famous people in Hollywood. Johnny Carson knew where he stood in history. But that's about all the respect there is. Finished. Carson behind the scenes couldn't stand working with Hope. The trouble was that they were so different, ways to make people laugh. Carson was all about being able to think fast and come up with new ideas. He loved impromptu moments and riffing, engaging visitors, and finding the funny side of places you wouldn't anticipate. Bob Hope, on the other hand, relied only on scripts things his team wrote. Every joke, tale, and answer was planned ahead of time. Andrew, Carson's head writer, Nichols, did a great job of explaining it. Hopper leaned on his authors for everything. Johnny thrived on connecting with actual chat. When Hope came on in The Tonight Show, he could only say certain questions in a certain order. If Carson went off script and asked it, Hope might give us something unexpected. Wrong answer because he was following the notes he had made. After an especially tough interview on the 1980s when Hope seemed to be gone and Carson's friends said he was confused when he told if I ever get like that. Staff, guys, I want you to shoot me. That show little he wanted to be like Bob what Hope had become. Off camera, things were even worse. When Frank Sinatra put together a party for Ronald Reagan's both Carson and Hope were at the inauguration, asked to do. Johnny was still one of the main acts, and Hope had Ailes's important role. Bob chose to give up Carson out. Hope followed Johnny down and gave him a few pages. Here, I wrote some lines that you might appreciate. To use. Carson thanked him nicely. Booth felt quite angry within. When Hope Johnny yelled at his crew that they had left. Can you imagine how brave that man was to think I want him to tell you jokes? The worst part for Carson couldn't get away from Hope. NBC loves Bob Hope because he still got huge ratings. The network had even given Hope permanent access to the studio that Carson used. Johnny had it, space. Except when Bob needed it, Hope may also make his own reservations on The Tonight Show whenever he wanted to advertise his many NBC programs. Peter Lasley was Carson's producer, told about the torture. We would get asked, and Johnny would go back and he'd ask, "Do you want to say no to him?" Carson knew he had to say yes because Hope had too much control at NBC. The last straw occurred at one of Hope's later appearances. Carson gave a monologue that was just awful. The audience was laughing so hard. Bob Hope, who was watching from backstage, asked whether he may use that recording of audience laughter to make his own special sound better. He wanted to use Carson's success to hide his own material that isn't working. Carson was shocked by the nerve, but they consented anyhow. That moment was everything for Johnny. Hated Bob Hope. The hopelessness, the need for other people, the inability Toned able to achieve on his own anymore. Sure, I respect his legacy. But really wanting to work with him? No way. Rickles, done. And now this is the moment you've been waiting for. Theoden Rickles is in first place. But there's the twist. This wasn't a connection based on hate or real hatred. It was something far bigger, more complicated, more fun, and to be honest, a lot more fun. Let's set the scene. Johnny Carson came back from took a night off, sat down at his desk. Right away saw that something was awry. His cigarette box, which he had 4 years, something he always carried with him, was shattered all the way from New York. The timber was broken. The component was broken. What the hell happened to this? Carson asked, really disturbed. Before any could answer, the audience started talking. Suddenly the team started yelling, "Rickles!" Doc Severson, the leader of the band, affirmed it. That night, Don Rickles had broken it previously while guest hosting with Bob Newhart. He'd been messing around, thumping on the desk for a while, and imaged Johnny's cherished by mistake. Carson was not happy. He said, "That's an heirloom." Then Simeone said that Rickles was hooding his sitcom. CPO Sharkey right at that same time, across the hall. You could see Carson's wheels whirling head. "Is it possible for me to get over there?" he asked making. When they answered yes, Carson picked up his broken box and and left his studio audience behind. A camera followed him as he walked through halls that lead to the double doors, red LEDs that flash. The Universal scene that filming was going on. "Are they taping?" Carson inquired. Then, no waiting for a response. "I don't care if broke through while they were on the air. Those doors, like a man on a mission. Stop the recording. Someone broke my package of cigarettes." Rickles lost for sure it. He was so anxious that he doubled over laughing. Carson's brow was sweaty as he stood there and held up the proof. "They said you broke it on the show last night." "Well, Rickles cold, scarcely able to speak, stammering through his laughter. "You big dummy," Carson yelled. The whole thing was both funny and really tense since you couldn't tell if Johnny was truly mad or just acting mad for fun. That was the brilliance of their dynamic. Rickles tried to make jokes, which made it seem like he would give Tony Randall the broken box as a present for the wedding. Carson wasn't playing with, "I want to know what you're going to do. Do anything about this." When Rickles said no, Carson took it to be truly sorry, took a stab at his failing show. He even made an uncomfortable racial comment to one of Rickles' black co-stars, told him to keep his other employment because if the show goes like the others, you're out off work in January. Finally, Rickles said sorry and promised to do it okay. Carson answered, "I hope so," admitting that he was angry. "I want some mething in return." But the story doesn't, that's all. Rickles 2 years later was a guest host on The Tonight Show again, but this time with Carol O'Connor. He did it in the usual Rickles way, went too far during a little, and began beating on Carson's desk. He suddenly recognized with dread that was going to break the box. Again, fixed or replaced since the first event. Rickles came to a complete stop. He snatched up the box like it was a sacred object and began to chant a prayer of protection over it. When told O'Connor that Carson would die, "I'm going to put, in all seriousness, him in this." That's the best way to sum it up, of the friendship between Carson and Rickles. They made each other crazy. Rickles always pushed the limits, and Carson would act like they were really upset while relishing every second of it in secret. Their conflict was basically just two masters of humor playing the longest-running bit in the history of television. Johnny Carson wasted king of late-night TV. Bev was still a person. He has his limits, his personal peeves, and the things that make him snap. Some guests went too far that they didn't know existed. People he trusted let him down or didn't value his intelligence. A few just rubbed him the wrong way for no reason really their fault. Thanks for seeing. Which of these fights shocked the most? Please tell us in the comments. And don't forget to sign up for more interesting stories from history of television.